Good afternoon. I am Melissa Bustamante with the Illinois Chapter American Academy of Pediatrics, and I thank you for joining us today for today's webinar on influenza season and vaccines. Today we are joined by Jennifer Burns from the University of Chicago Hospital and Angie Werkamp from Families Fighting Flu. Before we begin, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. Participating phone lines are muted. The webinar is being recorded. If you have any questions for our speakers during the presentation, please enter them in the question box on your control panel for the webinar on the right-hand side of your screen, and both presenters will answer them at the end of the presentation. Jennifer Burns attended Loyola University of Chicago and is a certified pediatric nurse practitioner currently working at the University of Chicago section of Pediatric Infectious Diseases. She is a member of the National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners and the Sigma Theta Tau Honor Society. Since Gianna's passing in January 2015, Angie is dedicated to educating people about the seriousness of influenza, as it can be unpredictable, but mostly importantly, it can be prevented with the flu vaccine. Angie, along with her husband and 16-year-old son, live in South Dakota, where they enjoy hunting, fishing, and camping together as a family. She also enjoys watching her son's powerlifting competitions. Prior to becoming a board member, Angie advocated in many ways, including interviews with local and national media outlets and donating infant hats with Gianna's story in South Dakota and Alaska. In addition to advocating, Angie has motivated her friends and family to plant trees across the nation in Gianni's memory. Angie became a Families Fighting Flu board member in September 2018. Without further ado, I'm going to have Jennifer present.
Thank you for taking the time to spend this afternoon with me. I'm going to talk about influenza season, our vaccines for the upcoming 2018 and 2019 season. I'm hoping everybody is well in and keeps immunizing, but we're going to talk about some of the updates that we had, because we had quite a few new updates. So first, our objectives are to reiterate the updates from ACIP, that's the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice, the impact of influenza disease yearly, our recommendations regarding LAIV, which is flu mist, pediatric vaccines, and egg allergy recommendations. What vaccines are available for 2018-19? Focusing on vaccines have now a broader age expansion, so that's new. Again, focusing on vaccinating all individuals, but especially our pregnant women and our healthcare provider. So what's new? FluMist is back. That LAIV stands for Live Attenuated Influenza Vaccine, quadrivalent, and it may be used again. It was off the market since 2016 and 17. Age expansions, Afluria and Fluarix, both quadrivalent vaccines, now can be given to younger individuals, and I'll talk about that more in the next slide. So just to reiterate, there's three different types of influenza disease, A, B, and C. A typically causes moderate to severe illnesses, and it affects all age groups, causes pandemics, infects humans and some animals such as pigs and birds, so avian and swine. That's why you hear swine flu, avian flu, so forth. Type B is milder than A, primarily affects children and those who have children or around children, and infects humans. And C are really reported as clinical illnesses, and most cases are subclinical, but they do exist. Here's our burden of influenza since 2010. You know, every year varies on how much flu we have based on vaccine match. So we can have anywhere from 9.2 million to 36 million cases of flu a year. Of those cases, we have anywhere from 140,000 to 700,000 individuals that are hospitalized, and deaths range from 12,000 to about 60,000 a year. What people don't realize too is influenza, we do get over influenza. However, then our immune system is secondarily weakened, and then people have pneumonias and encephalitis and seizures that are related to this that are attributed to influenza burden. What are the basics of the impact of influenza? We have epidemics and sporadic pandemics. Epidemics are located within our country. Pandemics are worldwide effect of the influenza virus. About 5 to 20% of the US population is infected each year. Illnesses occur in all age group, and our highest risk populations are young children, elderly patients, pregnant women, and then individuals with chronic conditions such as asthma, diabetes, heart disease, neurologic conditions, whether it's a learning disability, dyslexia, that counts, chronic renal and liver disease, and compromised immune systems. So looking at the impact of influenza in our 2017-18 season, last season we had a significant high severity. And this is the first that was ever classified of high severity for all age group. Since we really started tracking, when we really started tracking influenza in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And so this is the third highest rate since routine surveillance, and not including obviously H1N1 in 2009. Rates for all ages of hospitalizations was the highest documented since expanding the system to include the adults. And deaths, we had the highest peakly rate of death of about 11% since routine collection. And we had the highest number of pediatric deaths of 180 pediatric patients. And this is the highest number since recording began, excluding the pandemic flu, because pandemic looked at the world, where this is just looking at the United States, but significantly impact our pediatric patients. And it's just something that we really need to know going into this season. We also like to look at economic impacts, right? Adults, they have medical and indirect annual costs that go anywhere from have been estimated at $16 billion. But when we look at caregivers, this is only talking pure economics. It's not talking the stress of the economics and the stress it puts on to have a sick child. It looks at the caregiver for individuals who have children who are hospitalized. So if you have a child that's hospitalized, the parent is actually missing about 2 weeks of work. And the cost of missed work is $1,500. That's just the cost of that, plus anything else that they are now having to deal with their child being sick. Average out-of-pocket costs about $200, and then you look at the total medical care, it's $4,000. It's not a terribly big number, but when you add on other mental health components to it, and it's very significant. When we look at people that just visit ERs, they're missing about a half a week of work. They are having to spend $400, or so, and excuse me. Out-of-pocket cost is about $125, with the total medical cost about $700. Outpatient, live-in hours of work, 2 days of work for a week, and they are missing an average cost of $220. But again, it just goes back to show that there's significant cost associated it. So it's whatever we can get our parents and patients motivated to get them the vaccination. This is what we are presenting this data. So I'm using that as a way to get other people to get immunized. We do know that vaccination is the best way to prevent illness and complications. About 80% of the pediatric deaths happen in unvaccinated children. And the CDC estimated that vaccination could have prevented about 5.3 million illnesses, 2.6 million medical visits, and about 85,000 hospitalizations. And as I said before, that is significant in terms of cost and can help mentally with parents having good, healthy children. So our influenza vaccine recommendations. Our recommendation is that everybody greater than 6 months of age should get the vaccine indicated. So the only contraindication for flu vaccine and for any inactivated vaccine is a history of severe allergic reaction to any component of the vaccine, with the exception of egg allergies. LAIV has other restrictions that I'll go into. So when do we vaccinate? Well, pretty much as soon as you have vaccine in your fridge, you can start to vaccinate. As soon as you have people in the clinic with vaccine, you start to vaccinate. So the flu season kind of can vary. Typically has been historically anywhere between October and May. The peak is mostly December to February. Know that it takes 2 weeks to make antibodies from the vaccine. I say offer the vaccine as soon as possible, and I offer vaccine until it expires. I offer vaccine during routine healthcare visits, hospitalization, wherever the vaccine's available. I go out to schools and I do school located vaccine clinics, and that's where I do my vaccines and vaccinate throughout the entire flu seasons, because remember, people travel, and the most common vaccine preventable disease a traveler is going to get is going to be influenza. The types of vaccines we have, our nomenclature has changed. So we use IIV to represent inactivated influenza vaccines. So we either have IIV3 or IIV4. Those differentiate antigens. So one has 3 antigens, one has 4 antigens. We have cell culture based CCIIV, so that's cell culture based inactivated influenza, that's quadrivalent. And we have recombinant RIV4 vaccine. And then for our individuals older than 65, we have high dose vaccine and adjunctive activated ones for individuals that we know. This is only for 65 if we want to have boost their immunity, because we do have some studies to show elderly need more antigen. And then LAIV for live attenuated influenza vaccine, otherwise known as FluMist. So what's new? LIV can be used again. We're going to go into our AIDS expansions. So why are we using this vaccine? Well, it was pulled from the market in 2016 after they looked at every year the CDC is looking at flu activity and vaccine effectiveness. It's constantly being looked at. The company who does FluMist did pull the vaccine in 2016 voluntarily, because it saw that it had low vaccine effectiveness seen in previous seasons. Why did it change this recommendation this season? They had an in-depth data review from multiple sources. They discussed the benefits and harm of this vaccine, and they wanted to have confidence in this vaccine and get to use it. So here's the data that they looked at. They did an in-depth data of U.S. children and international data, because other countries didn't have the problem with the LAIV that we saw. So Canada and Europe still had this vaccine, and some of this data is based on that. What they found is in the LAIV that their H1N1 component of the flu vaccine was poorly effective, but their B and their A H3N2 was fine. So they discussed that because of this low vaccine effectiveness, they changed how they were making or adding the H1N1 component to the vaccine. Because when they added either it was trivalent, when quadrivalent, they added a third antigen, did it change the H1N1 component? Was there something in the manufacturing process that made it unstable and then deactivated it after a prolonged period of time? Now the company is saying that it's improved the manufacturing of this virus, that it should be more effective, and you should not see what we saw in 2015. So the Advisory Committee on Immunity Practice talked, and they said, you know what, influenza is an important cause of pediatric morbidity and mortality. We want to have this vaccine available for our pediatric patients. It was active against influenza B and the A H3N2, which is what was the majority circulating strain last year. And their new data has promising results. But every time you have data, you don't know if it truly will reflect, predict vaccine effectiveness. So they will be studying this quite stringently over the next 3 months as we see influenza disease. The ACIP wanted to have other options of non-injectable flu vaccine. They wanted to maintain confidence in flu vaccine, so they wanted to bring this vaccine back. They did know that national pediatric vaccine rates were stable when Flumis wasn't offered, but they did see a reduction in individuals between 5 to 12 years of age not being vaccinated. Vaccine effectiveness varies by seasons for all vaccines. And it wants to reintroduce that, Flumis is coming back after a 2-year hiatus, so we have to introduce it as a new product. And we want to hold all manufacturers to the same standards for vaccine effectiveness. What do we want to say about this? So as a provider, our goal right now, I'm with the Academy of Pediatrics, Academy of American and the statement that they want to use is that really when we're going in to immunize our children, we really should have the injectable flu vaccine be a primary choice for our children, because it really has been consistent in its vaccine effectiveness data for the whole year. We don't know if the nasal spray will be effective or not. But if I have a child that was not going to get a shot, this is who I need to use this Flumis for. Or if I have an adolescent child who's going to refuse to do anything unless they have the Flumis, this is who I use the vaccine for. Or as I've run out of flu vaccine and I only have LAIV, I have to say this is what I have, and you need to take it because this is what I have, and you're here in front of me in clinic right now, and I don't know when you're going to come back. That's an appropriate scenario as well. So that's the statement from AAP about that. Just a reminder, Flumis is quadrivalent. It's administered by a 0.1 ml to each nostril for a total of 0.2. It's given to children greater than equal 2 years of age and above to 49 years of age. Do not give LAIV if the individual is taking aspirin. Anybody who's between 2 to 4 years of age with an asthma diagnosis with asthma and wheezing in the past 12 months, just in case it can stimulate wheezing. We don't give it to pregnant women, people who are immunocompromised, and people who have severe allergy reactions. You should not take Flumis if you've had an antiviral medication for influenza in the last 4 hours, because it will deactivate the vaccine. And then there's a statement on close contact or caregivers who are severely immunosuppressed. Precautions, this is not only for Flumis, this is for all vaccines, but moderate or acute severe illness with or without fever. Anyone who's had Guillain-Barré within the 6 weeks following a previous dose of any influenza vaccine. So Guillain-Barré is that ascending paralysis, not to be confused with what's circulating with enterovirus and West Nile AFS, acute flaccid AFM myelitis. That's similar but a different cause. Any persons who have asthma greater than 5 years of age. And then some safety studies was not studied with certain individuals with underlying conditions. So age expansions, we have Afluria quadrivalent. It's not new well, actually, it is a new vaccine, 2018. Actually, it's not new. It had been licensed for individuals for 18 to 64, but they've changed that age to be individuals 5 years of age and so that's a beautiful thing. Is again a non-needle opportunity where it's a air push of giving this vaccine. So it used to be 18 years of age and above. Now you can give it to people 5 years of age and above. Fluarix is the same vaccine we give to individuals 3 years of age and above. Is now we can use to 0.5 mLs for our 6 months of age and above. This creates a third option of inactivated flu vaccine for kids between 6 months and 35 months of age. And this potentially is going to help our stock issue of grabbing the right vaccine to make sure we're always grabbing if we have one stock that we use for all. So that's a new change, that this vaccine was only for 3 and above before, now can be given to our individuals. And it is the same dose of 0.5 mLs. And then the kids who get this, who are getting their first flu vaccine, still would get another 0.5 mLs at 4 weeks later. I've had a lot of people calling me because they're thinking they have to squirt out 0.25. That's not the case. They looked at the data, and infants didn't have any more side effects and had good immune response with this. So our pediatric recommendations for children from 6 months of age to 8 years of age, if they've received two doses or greater of flu vaccine prior to July 1st, for 2018 and 19, only require 1 dose. If we do not know the child's history, we can give we need to give 2 doses. And if they've never received a flu vaccine, we need to give 2 doses. I'm always on the point of over-vaccinating infants and children if parents don't remember, because it's not going to hurt them to have the vaccine, and it's going to prevent a lot of disease and problems. I always put this algorithm up in my my clinic rooms, or I have it so my parents and I can say, here, show me. Let's talk about this. Has your child had 2 doses before this summer? No, I don't know. Well, if they don't know, I say, here, we have to do 2 doses. I have a lot of flexibility where I have walk-in clinics, evening, weekends, and so forth, where the parents have a lot of opportunities. And of course, the parents can bundle this flu vaccine into their infant's well care and so forth if needed. So talking about the recommendations for egg allergy, the only flu vaccine that is completely egg-free was our flu block quadrivalent. Now, this vaccine is, again, licensed for individuals 18 years of age and above. It's our recombinant influenza vaccine. And our CCIV is our cell culture-based influenza vaccine. This is Flucelvax. It's nearly egg-free. It has a minuscule amount of egg protein in the manufacturing process. But we don't need to worry about egg allergies. We're talking about anybody should be able to receive the flu vaccine. So for people with egg allergies that only cause hives, you have no special care. Observe as usual. Give whatever vaccines available in that clinic. But if I have somebody who has a severe allergy with anaphylaxis, their airway closed up, they have blood pressure problems, they need to be given a vaccine with an allergist and immunologist in a setting just to watch and see. And so that can be able to do that. I've given literally hundreds of thousands of vaccines, and the biggest question I ask parents, does your kid eat a cookie cooked with eggs, or have a cake, or you don't admit eggs from baked goods, your child is fine. And that's what I ask parents. Well, you're eating that cookie, you can have a flu vaccine. So it's a simple way to say to parents, oh yeah, that's fine. This looks at the algorithm for how to do it. This talks to you after eating eggs or egg-containing foods. Does the person only have hives? Yes. Go ahead and give flu vaccine. If they have cardiovascular changes, respiratory stress, you don't give the flu vaccine in just a clinic that has doesn't have critical care or access to ER. You need to instruct them, or they don't get the flu vaccine. But the minimum amount of people that have true anaphylaxis is significantly lower with egg. Production. Looking at our 2017-18 strains, but really we're going into 2018. I'm just going to go back. It's 2018-19. Our trivalent strains has our H1N1 pandemic-like virus. Our H3N2 coming from Singapore is what's in the vaccine. And then our Bs are Victoria, that's in the trivalent. Now, quadrivalent adds an additional strain of the B, which is the Yamagata. So there's only 2 strains of bee. It's either Yamagata or Victoria, where there's many different components of a H3N2 or H2N3. There's a lot of different nomenclature for our A viruses. So we're constantly looking at other countries. We're looking at data. We're always trying to see what's circulating in our country to look for vaccine, what we put in our antigen. So the predominant virus that was circulating last year was this H3N2 Singapore virus. So using the quadrivalent addresses for the possibility of the mismatch for the B strains. It has many different formulations. It's culture-based, recombinant, or LAIV, inactivated flu vaccine. So there's a lot of options for this. When you're choosing the choice for influenza vaccine, it should be, what does your clinic need? Who are your clinics serving? Really is, what is the age in which you're immunizing? Do you have a lot of patients that have contraindications or precautions? That should really drive how you're choosing what flu vaccine you buy. And I always like to add in their cost, right? You have to buy a vaccine that you know is going to be financially sustaining to your clinic so you can keep your doors open. And there's a lot of options. Who's going to give you a preferred contract and so forth. Right now, the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practice, the Academy of Pediatrics, all different organizations do not give a preferential statement. You should get quadrivalent versus trivalent, high dose versus standard, inactivated versus LAIV, with the exception that the AAP and the AAFP is recommending we must attempt to try to give inactivated influenza vaccine first to our kids because of the vaccine effectiveness consistency data. Otherwise, there's no preferential statement. This looks at all the different types of flu vaccines that we have available. They look at, is there latex in it? Different things that we need to know. Age indication, because, it's quite confusing. Not all flu vaccines. Cellvax right here, the bivalent, is only for 4 years of age. We have Fluzone for the 0.25. It's just 6 months to 35 months. They have different levels of egg proteins and different things like that. It has that listed there so you can see that. They're boosted with other components to make them more effective, different things like that. This next list is from the billing perspective, right? It's going to say who the manufacturer is. Here's the trade name. Here's how it's supplied. Is there any mercury content? There are some individuals that are very focused on that. No, anytime you're giving a vaccine in a syringe that is a pre-packaged syringe, it has no mercury content or it's preservative-free. But if you're doing a multi-dose vial, there is minimal preservative just so that as you're going in and out of the vial, it maintains sterility and effectiveness. And then gives you the age range. And for your billing persons, you need to know the CPT codes and the Medicare codes that you need to submit. So vaccinating our high-risk populations, our pregnant and postpartum women. I always like to go back to the 1918 pandemic flu. If you were pregnant and you had flu at that time, 50% of those women and infants died. Now in 2009, if you were pregnant and you had flu, there still is 30% morbidity and mortality associated with women who get influenza, whether they have are having a significant problem, or they potentially get premature labor or infant death related to influenza. So we still haven't moved with medications, that we don't have very good effective treatments to treat this once you get influenza. They should always receive, once you know you're pregnant, you should definitely be getting flu vaccine regardless of any trimester. The recommendation is not to use LAIV. We do know that the risk of hospitalization for women is 4 times higher than non-pregnant women. It can trigger premature labor and delivery, and then it can harm the developmental fetus. We know fever is associated with neural tube defects, and there's some developmental pediatric literature to associate that if women get influenza while they're pregnant with their child, there sometimes can be neurocognitive problems associated with that infant if the mother lives from having influenza. So how do you vaccinate them? You give a strong recommendation from the provider is crucial. Know that vaccination in any trimester is good. It passes the protection to the unborn child. I like sooner the better, as soon as you know. I was insistent upon this. I just had a baby, vaccinate close contacts to protect the baby. And I looked at the records before they would come over to make sure they would come in. I had worked too hard to have children not to do so. If you identify a woman on the postpartum unit to be vaccinated, if not done during pregnancy, breastfeeding is not a contraindication. Breastfeeding passes on maternal antibody. For people with asthma, we know that flu can trigger asthma. Flu can trigger pneumonias that can be very severe, and that individuals should get a flu vaccine, not recommending LAIV. They also need to be vaccinated with pneumococcal vaccine. They should have an asthma action plan. And if infected, they should take antivirals prescribed by a doctor. They're recommending not using zanamivir or Relenza because there's been some data that show that it can increase wheezing associated with that. We do know that we need to vaccinate children with neurologic disorders. The vaccine is the best protection. Vaccinate annually. We know that they had the highest number of deaths in 2009 from H1N1 was individuals with neurologic disorders, and they have a high risk of serious complications. If we think that they have influenza, should we treat early and aggressively? And I'm talking about neurologic conditions are not just individuals with CP and seizures. These are people that could have neurologic learning disabilities where they got influenza and they lost some function of activities of daily living or an IQ point, which set them back. So you have to look at it that way as well. Again, this is a long list. Risks for people with complications. I mean, what American doesn't have one of these risks? Hopefully none of us do, but some of us do at one point in our time. So it's getting our children and teenagers on aspirin, and our adults, our obese persons, heart disease, lung disease, neurologic and neurodevelopmental conditions, asthma, our young children 5 and under, and especially our children under 2. Healthcare personnel. This looks at vaccine coverage rates from 2010, starting from 2010 to 11 to 2017, 18. We know that the healthcare, our goal is to have healthcare providers immunized at 90%. We're better, but we're still needing to improve this. That really when we're offering the vaccine in November, there's not as much uptake, but then again, there's a little bit of disease and we see how health care providers react to that. So it's best to get your vaccine before you see disease so you can be healthy. It keeps our patients safe and healthcare providers safe. It demonstrates confidence in the vaccination. It decreases absenteeisms and lost costs. It's recommended by many national organizations. And then the goal to increase healthcare provider vaccine free on-site promoted vaccination and workspace. And then some healthcare providers are require vaccination for employment. So if you don't have a contraindication, some institutions in Chicago, like Cook County, Stroger, Rush, have mandated you have to, if you want to work for us, you have to get your flu vaccine. Otherwise, you can't work for us. So a summary of our updates is that our flu mist LAIV can be used again for kids 2 years of age. It's important to know that inactivated influenza vaccine is preferred. So that's the message to send there. Age expansions, that our Fluria is now greater than 5 years of age. So that's wonderful. And our flu Rix is 6 months of age and older can receive the 0.5 dose. Thank you very much. And now Angie will go ahead and speak, and we'll have questions after her.
Thank you, Jennifer and Melissa. Hello, everyone. My name is Angie Werkamp, and I am a Families Fighting Flu board member. When I'm not advocating for flu awareness, I enjoy spending time outdoors with my husband and son. We love hunting and fishing and camping together along with our friends and family. Prior to 2015, I was completely unaware that influenza was the deadliest vaccine preventable disease in the United States, and that perfectly healthy children could die from the flu. I unfortunately had to experience that devastation firsthand, and today I am here to tell you about my beautiful 2.5-year-old daughter, Gianna. Gianna was a very happy and healthy little girl. She was this little blonde-haired, blue-eyed spitfire and kept us all on our toes. She was constantly climbing things and hiding behind doors and furniture, always trying to scare you. She was her 12-year-old brother's little shadow, which is probably where she learned to be so creative. She followed him everywhere, and he always made sure that he included her. It was the sweetest thing, whether it was playing basketball with his friends or riding his motorcycle. She was always right there by his side. She especially loved getting rides on his motorcycle, and she looked so cute in her little helmet. She was absolutely fearless. Gianna's flu story starts on January 8th, 2015, when I picked her up from daycare. She felt a bit warm, but she had just woken up from a nap, so I didn't really put much more thought into it. By bedtime, she was, in fact, running a low-grade fever, so I gave her some ibuprofen before putting her to bed. The next morning, she sounded really croupy, and I knew that influenza was going around, so I decided to go ahead and take her to the doctor right away. She was diagnosed with influenza A, H3N2. She was prescribed an antiviral and sent home to rest. The doctor that we visited had assured me that since I brought her in so soon after her first symptoms, that day would be the sickest that she would be. Once the antiviral kicks in, she'll be on the mend. She's going to be just fine. So the rest of the day, I took her home. Gianna watched all of her favorite cartoons, curled up on the chair with her favorite teddy bear. She never once complained about anything. Even though you could see that her chest was congested, you could hear it. You could just tell she wasn't feeling well, but she did not whine, cry, not a single complaint from her all day. At 8 o'clock that night, I took her to bed with me so I could keep a close eye on her. She woke up around midnight because her fever had spiked. I got her a drink of water, a little bit more ibuprofen, and we went back to bed. And I patted her on her back until we both fell asleep. At one point, I heard her call out for me, "Mom, Mom, Mom." So I pulled her in close, and I told her everything was going to be all right. We just needed the medicine to kick in. After all, that's what the doctors had told us. She's going to be fine. At approximately 3 a.m., I woke up with a sick gut feeling and Gianna's lifeless body in my arms. She was not breathing, and she was blue. I gave her CPR while my husband was on the phone with 911. Once the paramedics arrived, we were rushed off to another area of the house while the paramedics gave her CPR. It took nearly a half an hour before her little heart started beating again. I thanked one of the paramedics as they were leaving, and she turned to me and said, "I wish I could have done more." I didn't really know what that meant at the time. But on the way to the hospital, there were no sirens, There was no real sense of urgency from the police or the paramedics. It was all just very unsettling. Once we arrived at the hospital, they ran a battery of tests on her. And a few hours later, one doctor pulled us off into a tiny room with a computer monitor. He showed us there was no fluid around her brain where there was supposed to be. She had gone far too long without oxygen. He then gave us the "if this were my daughter" speech. She was not going to recover from this. There was no brain activity. So a few hours later, Gianna was taken off life support again. And for the second time that day, I had her lifeless body in my arms. On January 10th, 2015, our beautiful, otherwise healthy 2.5-year-old daughter, Gianna, died because of the flu, less than 48 hours after her first symptoms of a low-grade fever. We had no idea that perfectly healthy children could die from the flu. We had no idea that 20,000 children under the age of 5 are hospitalized every year because of the flu. The flu is not just another cold. The flu is serious, and it is very unpredictable. That year, my husband, son, and I all had our flu vaccinations, but we just never got around to getting Gianna hers. I have no idea why. I suppose we just didn't think that it was that important. I mean, she was only ever at home or at her very small in-home daycare. 3 weeks after we lost Gianna, our son Ethan was diagnosed with influenza A as well. He was given the same regimen of antivirals and sent home to rest. And all I could think was, here we go again. But he was feeling better by the next day, and he was back to himself within a week, just like the doctor said Gianna would be. But then again, he was vaccinated, and she wasn't. A flu vaccine may not guarantee that you won't get the flu, but it greatly reduces the chances of severe complications. And we will continue to flu vaccinate, not only to protect our family, but to protect our community. I am a Families Fighting Flu board member because I want others to know that the flu is serious, but it is also preventable. While Families Fighting Flu was founded by families with stories like mine, you do not have to have experienced loss or devastation from the flu to join our fight. We have advocates and medical advisors that have joined because they too know the importance of flu awareness and vaccinations. I encourage you to visit familiesfightingflu.org and click the Join Now button. Once you're on our website, you will see that we have not only family stories, but flu facts and several resources available for everyone. We offer things like grief support and emotional support for families, and we also have an amazing healthcare professional toolkit. There's a little bit of something for everyone there. What I need you guys to remember today is that influenza is serious and unpredictable, but most importantly, it is preventable. Please get your flu vaccination to protect yourself and your family, not just this year, but every year. Thank you for having me.
Angie, thank you so much for sharing your story. Really, really appreciate you being here with us. Guys, I do open this up for our attendees to ask any questions for both Jennifer or Angie. Again, it is on your right-hand side that you guys can enter those questions. If there are no questions, we will move forward. Thank you everyone for joining us at today's webinar. ICAP hosts many immunization webinars throughout the year. This is our last one for 2018, but we are currently working for 2019, and those will be going up for registration at our illinoisaap.com website. By the end of day tomorrow, you will all receive an email with a link to the recording of today's webinar, a PDF of PowerPoint slides, and a link to the evaluation. You will have 2 weeks to complete this evaluation. After 2 weeks, the evaluation will be closed and you will no longer be allowed to fill out the evaluation to receive certificate of attendance and or continuing education credit. Approximately 2 weeks after evaluation is closed, you should receive your certificate. Thank you once again, Jennifer Burns and Angie, for opening up and sharing your story, for the excellent presentation, and to everyone for joining us today's webinar. We hope that many of you will join us for our next webinar.